Welcome, everyone, to this Professional Development Hour presentation brought to you proudly by the Atlanta Metro chapter of the Georgia Society of Professional Engineers, an affiliate of the National Society of Professional Engineers. Before we begin, we'd like to let you know that any opinions presented tonight are solely the opinions of the presenter and not that of the Georgia Society of Professional Engineers, the National Society of Professional Engineers, or any other of its affiliates. We certainly hope you will enjoy tonight's presentation, so sit back and relax. And on with the show.
Gotta see him when he has three hands.
Multitasking.
Okay, go ahead. So, good evening. Tonight's speaker is talking about tabletop exercises, which are a great way to make plans for emergency response plans. Some places do it well, some places not so well. Our speaker tonight is Matt Spencer. He's a certified safety professional. He's certified with HR organization, SHRM. He has been in HR and safety programs. He's the vice president for U.S. Poultry and Egg. That's the organization that puts on the annual poultry show here in Atlanta every year. I met him in August at the Poultry Industry Safety Seminar Conference, and he's speaking tonight on tabletop exercises.
All right, Roger, thank you. Everybody can hear me fine? Because I'm coming across good, so thank you for having me tonight. Thank you, Roger, for the invite. Thank you for supporting the poultry and egg industry. Again, my name is Matt Spencer. I'm with the U.S. Poultry and Egg Association. Our offices are literally just right down the road from here in Tucker, Georgia. We are a nonprofit association that represents the poultry and egg industry. We are the largest poultry organization in the world that represents not only the poultry producers, but the farmers, the growers, the integrators, and that goes, when you say poultry, that means anything with feathers that you can eat is poultry, and we represent those organizations. As Roger referenced, we have the huge International Poultry Expo that's held every January in Atlanta at the Georgia World Congress Center. That is our biggest event. It's a global conference where we have between 30 and 40,000 people from around the globe come in looking at equipment, machinery, services, from worker safety to production, processing, research, genetics, and you name it. We also work with approximately 27 state poultry associations, even here in Georgia. The Georgia Poultry Federation office is located in Gainesville, Georgia. We're a proud partner with them in working on supporting and promoting the poultry industry around the state of Georgia, but also around the globe. So a lot of times people ask, why is a poultry and egg guy here talking about tabletop programs? And I'll kind of allude to a little bit. We've had things that have happened in the poultry and egg industry that has definitely opened our eyes to the importance of risk management and risk avoidance. So we'll talk about the agenda today and talk about kind of why tabletop programs are so important to our industry and why we try to promote them as much as we do in different areas around the globe and the country. So we're going to talk about risk management and avoidance. We're going to talk about what a tabletop program is and its rules and objectives of a tabletop program. We're actually going to do a hands-on exercise. I think we have enough people here tonight to do two different exercises, so we'll break up in two groups and do two exercises. I know that won't be the greatest for those at home or on camera, but we'll kind of break away for a bit of time to do those exercises. We'll come back and capture some of the objectives, things that you learned, some things that went well, some things that could be improved upon the tabletops that you conduct. And then we'll talk about just kind of action, what an after action review is, and just answer any questions that may have come up from our presentation. So we're going to talk first about risk management and avoidance. So risk management is all about contemplating likely scenarios so you can minimize precarious situations, okay? Now, when people usually hear risk management, it's usually avoidance of injury, avoidance of accidents. But risk can be anything that impacts your businesses, okay? Risk associated with loss of customers, risk of exceeding permits with the city or state or municipalities. It's solutions. We have to anticipate and have adequate solutions in place to prevent problems from occurring. So we're going to talk about 4 common risk management techniques. Avoidance, obviously, evading actions that will generate or increase risk. Retention, conceding an inevitability or particular risk because avoiding them poses more cost or risk for the loss. Sometimes we know of situations in different industries where high-risk situations occur, and we just write those in or anticipate those in our plans. Loss prevention and reduction. Obviously, containing risks that can be eliminated or keeping its losses to a minimum. Obviously, in stores, we talked about warehousing and customers. They all anticipate risk. Their whole goal is to keep that risk at a bay or at a minimum to not impact the bottom line. And then transferring or sharing risk, okay? This is shifting some of that risk to a third party, bringing in a third party contractor. I know some of you are consultants, so sometimes it's easier to have the consultant handle that than the internal staff to do that because that takes the risk off the organization. Same thing goes in our industry too. You know, we're looking for labor, bringing in third-party labor, bringing in third-party organizations to do cleaning and sanitation and different things like that because those items may be high risk, so it's better to transfer or share that risk. So how to apply these techniques, it depends on your organization's situation. We say this a lot with worker safety and HR, but also with engineering and other groups in an organization. It's important to know the situations when you need to use different types of risk management and avoidance. So again, we'll get to why we talked about tabletop programs and why this is important to us. I don't know if you're familiar with, but back in January of 2021, we had a fatality case in Gainesville, Georgia, where tragically 6 workers passed away due to exposure to liquid nitrogen release at a processing facility up there in Gainesville. After this tragedy occurred, obviously there was a big investigation by the Chemical Safety Board. OSHA came and did a full investigation of it as well too. And we identified through that investigation that there were several risk areas that could have been avoided. One of those big glaring risks that was identified was the lack of knowledge by the local community and the emergency planning officials, emergency response officials about the processes going on not only in this plant, but in the industry as a whole. We heard and were reached out by contacts from emergency response officials from all over the country saying, what is liquid nitrogen? When we talk about nitrogen, we know it's a colorless, often non-hazardous gas. But in the quantities that our industry is using and this facility was using it, and in the environment that it was located at, it was enough to be fatal for these workers. So again, this opened our eyes that we need to form as an industry better relationships with our local community, our local officials, whether it be municipal officials, state or federal officials, on risk that our industry has so that they're better prepared and are better able to provide response to our industry when a tragedy happens. So identify that. We obviously reviewed threat scenarios, conducting risk assessment. We looked at those 4 different models of risk assessment I mentioned just earlier. But the big thing we identified is we have to develop detailed emergency response plans. Okay. Now you can identify in Georgia, just to focus on Georgia, severe weather. What have we had the past 2 weeks? Some major hurricanes that have impacted our state. Okay. We can identify and anticipate those things, but it's the situation what we just said, those are something that we did not anticipate. We didn't plan or drill out those situations. Okay. Perform emergency exercises. You know, as per OSHA standards, if you're familiar with OSHA standards, you have to do fire drills every year. You have to do chemical spills every drill. Nowadays, companies are doing workplace violence drills, okay? So those are things that are set up or governed by agencies, but these other unanticipated events, when they occur, are we doing a good enough job training and educating our employees on a frequent basis if these situations occur? Setting specified training requirements, okay? With this tragedy that we mentioned to, we identified that the knowledge of these chemicals that we use, and then more training was needed. Training for workers on how to work with it, making sure that people knew their exposure to these chemicals that are used in large quantities. Make sure agreements are in place regarding mutual aid. So, you know, Life Safety Codes, the National Fire Protection Agency, says that, you know, letting the fire department, whether it be a full-time fire department or volunteer fire department, having them come onto your facility, understanding mutual aid, understanding what capabilities and processes they have in place for fire, for rescue when they come to your place of employment. A lot of our members are located in rural areas of this country where they do not have full-time firefighting capabilities in their communities. A lot of times those voluntary firefighters are also employees at that organization as well too. And in some instances, that plant may have more fire prevention or more mutual aid equipment at the facility than the local community does have access to. So setting up those relationships, knowing those capabilities, participating in the local emergency planning commissions. How many of you are involved with LEPCs? Okay, nobody. Okay, if you have
urban people.
Urban people, of course, but hey, there are LEPCs in urban environments too. And those meetings are open to businesses, they're open to members of the community as a whole, and it gives you a better understanding of what capabilities and processes that they have in place in your local county or community to provide.
What do the initials stand?
LEPC, Local Emergency Planning Commissions. So each county will have a local LEPC. Some counties in rural environments will coordinate and partner with other counties that based on population density in the counties and stuff. So some of our rural counties in Georgia may partner with 2 or 3 other counties to set up a base of our LEPC where they will share mutual aid amongst those counties. Larger counties like DeKalb, Gwinnett have their own well-defined LEPCs for the county as a whole, and they know their capabilities, whether it be hazmat response, whether it be urban rescue, or different things like that that they can provide. So those techniques are important to understand those capabilities as a company, as an organization. If you have, say, large silos or bins where people are climbing up into at all times, you need to know that your local emergency officials have the ability to have rope rescue or urban rescue if someone falls. So understanding those mutual agreements are important. And finally, ensuring the availability of supplies and equipment, okay? If you know that you have an operating process facility where you have hazardous materials that if they release, say anhydrous ammonia at a chicken processing plant, those facilities are refrigerated by anhydrous ammonia. If you have a release in a rural environment, it's helpful to know how long hazmat response may take to get to your facility. That's why a lot of these companies and facilities have their own hazmat response teams, because the local capability is so far removed that it may take 30 minutes to an hour plus for them to respond, provide assistance to the operation. So it's good to understand what kind of equipment, processes, access to that equipment is available. So having those relationships are key. So we're going to get into what a tabletop exercise is, okay? what drove us to us. So kind of the long definition from FEMA is a tabletop exercise is a discussion-based exercise conducted in response to a scenario intended to generate dialogue on various issues, facilitate conceptual understanding, identify strengths and areas for improvement, and or change perceptions about plans, policies, or procedures. Again, I'm all about simplified definitions, okay? You're probably going to forget that as soon as I read that to you. The WHO organization has, I think, the perfect definition of what a tabletop exercise. It simulates an emergency in an informal, stress-free environment, okay? So when we do exercises today, one of the things I want to stress to you that no answer is a wrong answer, okay? It's an exercise for a reason, okay? No one's life is on the line. No one's at risk based on the responses and items that you collect during these exercises. These are a way to conceptualize and take a made-up event and identify what you would do each step of the way that goes through that process, okay? So the design purpose. So design, you know, there's a lot of different designs out there. I think one of the best ones when you're looking at developing a tabletop program for an organization or for an area is that the CDC, Department of Homeland Security, and FEMA have designed a private sector organization tabletop program exercise template out there that's really easy to use. It helps you identify businesses, retail establishments, as well as nonprofit organizations. U.S. Poultry Egg Association, being a nonprofit organization, really head up our alley of doing the tabletop programs for our organization, if what impacted our nonprofit organization, but what may impact our members as well too. So it helped develop those processes using the government assistance in those programs. Through facilitated group discussion, the exercise aims to help organizations assess their business continuity plans, identify actions that can help them protect their employees and customers, and identify actions to minimize impact on business operations. So these programs out there, if you've not been to the FEMA website, obviously they've got a lot of great education and training resources on public planning and developing action plans with state, local, and federal agencies. One of the programs out there that's very beneficial is coordinating emergency planning with public emergency officials. As I mentioned, as you interact with those public emergency officials, there's a development process that FEMA developed out there where you can help plan for exercises, plan for emergencies, engage in those resources, integrate plans and risk in place, and assess and refine. This is a very detailed program that's out there. Gives a lot of great resources on how businesses can form those relationships. We've promoted this a lot with our members, especially in those rural environments where their local LAPC may not have a lot of resources, funding to develop educational resources, giving them tools to help those agencies or those counties develop protocols and plans in place with their organization, as well as other community organizations in that area as well too. Now, the P3 development process includes local advocates and service providers. So when I say it's not only just your local governments that you're trying to plan partnerships with, but sometimes it's community providers, whether it be housing providers, whether it be religious providers, first aid, agencies that support healthcare, local non-government organizations, faith-based organizations. Having those relationships in your community are key. It's one of the things we stress. You know, we've had, last year we had some pretty bad tornadoes go through areas of the country that impacted our processing plants. And those individuals needed contact with local food banks, local housing areas. We get temporary housing for some of the workers, other process community environments, and setting up this framework before those events occur was vital for these organizations where they could get direct their employees for benefits and services because of the community as a whole was damaged during these events. So doing those tabletop exercises and those pre-planning activities with the local community providers was vital for our members and organizations. Okay? So I'm going to switch to an example of a tabletop program recently, and this is something that happened in the environment. So everyone knows of Hurricane Helena that impacted us a couple weeks back. In particularly the city of Asheville, North Carolina, saw significant damage. This picture here is actual satellite imagery of the path of Helene as it went through the United States, through Florida, Georgia, up into North Carolina. It shows those black areas there were the power outage of the damage and the path of destruction of this hurricane. So why I'm focusing on Asheville is they have had some success with tabletop programs. So back in 1916, Asheville had a catastrophic flood occur. It's still called, or stands as the flood by which all other floods are measured. Okay? If you're not aware of this, this was one of the most deadly floods to occur in the United States. Happened back in 1906 in Asheville. When two tropical storms converged over the mountains in this area, it dumped enough water in this area in a 24-hour period, the most that's ever been measured by the National Weather Bureau since this time. Okay? So it dumped that amount of rain in this area. And then Hurricane Helena happened. You see here the damage so much it knocked down one of the signs talking about the flood of 1916. That was how bad the rain occurred in that area. Dams were breached in 1916. A lot of damage occurred in that area. Very eerily, when you say that, it sounds very eerily to what happened a couple weeks ago. So when we were talking about this, in 2004, they had virtually the same scenario that happened in 1916, where they had a huge flood that came through. Two tropical storms, Ivan and Francis, converged in the same area. It was the wettest September ever recorded, killing 11 people. And the city, after that event, conducted a tabletop exercise to determine what they could do to prevent the amount of significant damage they saw back not only in 1916, but in this event in 2004. City officials designed, and design consultants brought up a scenario of the Norfolk River. So there's two rivers that go through Asheville. There's the Norfolk River and the, I forgot the name of the other river. I think it's the, don't know off the top of my head. But they did a scenario of the dam on the Norfolk River collapsing and what that impact would be on the community. And the action items they identified during that tabletop program back in 2004 was raising the dam by 4 feet, adding additional EMS personnel trained, specialized in level in swiftwater rescue, and certified divers on their EMS staff, as well as increased staffing to provide the best possible response and coverage during weather emergencies. They also developed a flood ordinance mandating that all new buildings in the Biltmore Village flood zone be 2 feet above base elevation. So this was some of the new buildings built after this change in this tabletop exercise. Same footage picture there back in the late 2006, 2007 when that was built. This is the same image after Hurricane Helena. So those buildings were pretty much unscathed other than basement areas that may have had some flooding, but because of that 2 foot or more above elevation development of these buildings, whereas some of the older buildings that you saw, the historic district of Asheville, are just completely destroyed because they were built before this ordinance went in place. So this just kind of shows firsthand that some of these lessons learned from these tabletop exercise programs were able to help them identify some areas to improve upon, and you see the benefit of that coming to fruition. So what are the rules of a tabletop tabletop exercise. It's a no-fault environment, okay? No one's at fault. You know, when we go through the scenarios, we're going to talk about things that go wrong during a scenario. It's no fault of one group or another, but it's just a scenario. There are no wrong answers, okay? This is a discussion, not an evaluation. You need to respect the views of others as they bring them forward during an exercise. You reply to the scenario as you would in a real life in your current position, okay? So if you're in a position where you are an EMS professional, a worker safety professional, an engineer, how would you respond during these events? Now we're going to hand out some cards and you're going to select a role. You have to put yourself in that mindset of being an EMS professional, means a police fire official, or being a worker safety professional, or being a production manager. Put yourself in that scenario and how would you react during this scenario? Do not fight the scenario, okay? What that means is do not try to fight it or prevent it from happening, okay? This is an exercise, okay? This is not real life, but it could be real life, okay? So do not fight the scenario. Go with the scenario and put actions in place based on the scenario. Assume your jurisdiction has only the assets and capabilities that it has today, okay? Don't assume that, hey, I know this community is getting a huge new hazmat truck or they're getting all this equipment. You need to assume in current date and times the capabilities that that jurisdiction has. Well, you've got some make-believe jurisdictions here, so you have to make some assumptions of what they have in place. Okay, and based on that, based on an exercise, it helps you identify do they have the right capabilities in place? What recommended additional capabilities should they put in place? So what are the overarching exercise objectives? Obviously discuss the role of company leadership in considering and making decisions on potential community mitigation measures. Discuss and determine what measures our company should implement to ensure business continuity and maintain a viable workforce. Discuss and determine how we will develop and adapt our crisis communication strategy. We need to discuss and determine what policy changes may be necessary to support the response. And we need to discuss the risk, the company's supply chains, and means to mitigate those risks. So there's different roles in a tabletop exercise. There's the players, which we say those are the ones that discuss what their responses would be in the situation presented. So I'm going to give you, we're going to break into two groups. I'm going to give you a scenario. And then I'm going to come out a couple of minutes and hand you another event occurring during that scenario. And in the role that you select, you need to discuss what your response would be based on that update to your scenario. Okay? So what would be your scenario? Again, there's no wrong answers. Okay? Put what you think the response should be. Okay? There's a facilitator. I am the facilitator. I'm the one putting this forward, okay? So I'm putting forward the scenarios. I'm bringing forward changes of that scenario as it happens. You're going to have an evaluator. So one of you will be the evaluator for each of your groups. So you're going to evaluate that the discussion doesn't get stuck in this one. No one person's leading the discussion, that everyone is providing input on this scenario, okay? They're putting input, they're putting their observations, they're making sure that the discussion continues to flow and that it doesn't get to, oh, what about that baseball game? Or how about the Falcons? How good was that game the other night? Keep on task, keep on the response. Observers. Since we don't have a large group here tonight, we don't have people that are observing. We may have one or two people that may not have a role that are an observer, and they're just people that are there to participate. They might not have an active role in the tabletop exercise, but they can observe how well it's flowing. Did it work well? Did it get mired in discussion that wasn't pertinent to the exercise as a whole? So they're there simply for an observation purpose, but they have a lot of great input when it comes to these exercise program. And then there's obviously you have to have a note taker. So there's a scribe. There's the one that writes down the discussion and documents the findings and the discussion during that exercise. So what are some key questions in policy planning? So, what are the immediate plans or actions? What critical resources or supplies are most concerned about being affected by a disruption in your supply chain? Does your organization have legal or other regulatory requirements, obligations you must comply with? How can your organization financially sustain a significant reduction of business? And what potential policy issues are you most concerned about, and what immediate actions should be taken? So these are things to keep in consideration as we go through this exercise. We're also going to talk about what are incident management key questions as well as business continuity key questions. So who's responsible for managing the organization's response? What are the most significant challenges to your anticipating regarding managing your organization's response? And how will you work with state or local governments who are designated during the business as essential during a lockdown or curfew, anything like that? How are you going to work with those municipalities? Some business continuity wins. How will the company communicate essential information to employees during an event? Do we have the necessary strategies to maintain a company's reputation during a significant event? How long will it take for company data to be available following an event? We're having all these cyber crimes and hacks and stuff like that. How quickly we can get that data back? And what are the roles and responsibilities that I need to assign? So we are getting ready to break up into tabletop programs. We have 3. I'm going to choose 2 to drop of the hat. We've got one that is a business one. We've got a crane collapse one, and then we have a chemical release one. So I'll let the groups kind of pick and choose from those 3 groups. We're going to have 1 evaluator, 4 to 5 players, a scribe, and then if there's observers, you're going to monitor the event. You're going to provide me with 2 to 3 strengths that you observed during the exercise and 2 to 3 areas of improvement that need to be you observed during the exercise.
I have to keep the time. We have to be out of here at approximately 8.
We'll be fine, sir. We'll be good. Okay. So let's go into the tabletop exercise now.
How many people per group?
I would say 5. How many we got here?
11.
Yeah, so we can do 5, 1 and 5, 1 and 6. Okay? Okay, so get together real quickly and we can get this going. Scenarios and stuff. What's that?
Very compressed.
Very compressed, correct. So just some general thoughts from each of the groups. Now we had some scribes there. What were your thoughts from this group? First, kind of explain to the other group what yours, just a 30,000 foot view of what your scenario, what happened at yours.
We'll let the incident command.
So okay. So our incident was actually a chemical leak, specifically chlorine, and the entirety of our incident, we were trying to figure out how to successfully stop our village from being overtaken by a chlorine cloud and, limit the amount of casualties. So with that being said, between city officials, different city officials, alerting the plant officials, as well as keeping the EMS and making a perimeter, we were able to keep as many people from being sick and limit the risk as much as possible.
Yeah, when I created that, I had no idea that would kind of mirror what happened in Conyers. So again, it's when fiction becomes reality kind of scenario. So correct, yes. So a scenario that was just one that we developed many years ago, and it's kind of come to fruition here in Georgia. So.
Do you happen to have the loader numbers for them?
What's that?
Do you happen to have the loader numbers?
I wish. My wife would be a lot more happy with me if I did. So okay, good. What was some good? What did you thought went well? What do you think? Some more questions you had?
The compressed time frame,
correct,
made things a little more challenging.
Correct.
We started out by discussing aspects of the scenario and started to identify options and potential actions like notification, like
correct,
proposed evacuations or
correct,
shelter in place, those kinds of options. We talked about logistics, how are we going to instantaneously evacuate the school if we decided to do that. Then we identified potential risks, explosion, exposure, chemical burns, physical impairments, water contamination.
Excellent.
And then we started to identify actions that we might take. Shelter in place, Shut off the water, get the word out, use the media
correct,
to get the word out.
Excellent.
Areas for improvement, we couldn't find the pre-planning that had been done already in this plant.
So that means probably isn't in
Yeah, exactly. And then the scarcity of information and the fast-changing conditions made it a bit of a challenge in a 20-minute exercise.
Correct, yes. And people ask me all the time, how long does an effective tabletop program usually last? I say minimum 4 hours. You need to go until conversation on a topic stops, then you move to the next topic in an exercise and stuff too. You're not going to have someone like myself feeding you papers as quickly as possible to meet a deadline. You want the process to really work out, because even that short period of time, you had a lot of great action items there that you came up with. So excellent job. Yes, sir.
One thing I noted as I noted that consensus was reached very quickly.
Correct.
And also the shifting of gears between messages
correct,
was very, very efficient.
That's great. That's great. Okay. This group over here, what was your scenario?
All right, we had a manufacturing facility that was expanding, bringing in 2 new air scrubbers and 21 new formation lines, but they had an issue where I guess they were already close to their air quality permit limits, and they submitted for a permit to increase their levels, but I can't say it was before the permit was approved, but at some point they exceeded their permitted amount, so that was an issue. Then the next issue was the additional lines were going to cause more wastewater treatment to be needed, so they had to submit a permit for that also. And so then there were also shipping delays with the lines that they were acquiring, issues with concrete in the facility that had to be changed out or repoured, and in the end, the lines came on. The lines were installed and running, say 2 months after it was planned. But come to find out, the lines didn't perform as expected. They were only running about 50% of their capacity. So
correct.
A lot of problems.
How many times have you seen that scenario where we're going to add a new process line in an old existing structure of a building? Your scenario, an old warehouse that they're converting into production space, and finding out that the concrete, the established infrastructure is not adequate for what the equipment you're bringing in. And you were focused solely on the air permitting, that you didn't see the wastewater creeping up behind you and biting you, okay? So those are real scenarios that happen, okay? What were some of the things you observed, things that went well, things like that?
Reminded of the joke, there are two kinds of people, those who can deal with incomplete information and...
Yeah, that's a good one.
I've gone through courses where we're using case studies, and a feature of the case study was incomplete information.
Correct.
Still needed to reach a decision.
Correct.
And recommendations.
Correct.
Okay, I was analyzing what was going on, and as far as assessment and notification, this team did a good job of informing senior management of the concrete issue. They didn't always inform the team of all of the other, inform senior management of all of the other issues. I was a little bit surprised. We spent quite a bit of time finding people to blame for the problem.
Remember, this is a no-blame environment.
I know, but what I'm saying is it was interesting because quite a bit of time was spent, well, this is that job function's responsibility. Those guys should have done such and such. I found it to be very interesting.
And that's good. And that's
right.
Exactly. It is human nature. It is human nature.
It is human
it's
nature. The trick is to try to go and put that behind you and say, I know it's Joe's fault. But it's like, I don't need to tell everybody it's Joe's fault. And I certainly don't need to tell Joe, because he knows it's his fault.
And I've conducted many of these where I've felt like I was a referee, where I had to stop the exercise and say, listen, we're not going to get anything if we're sitting there pointing the fingers on this mock situation. What happens in a real situation that comes? Are you probably going to be the same way, pointing fingers and all that. So we have to get in that environment where it's a no blame environment, which is hard to do. It's human nature, like you said. But
as far as business continuity, the only thing I saw this team come up with, and we really didn't have enough time, because pretty much as soon as we finished reading it, we had like 1 minute, and then the next one came.
Correct.
Sometimes we didn't even have a minute.
Correct.
They wanted to call HR to hire more people and to perform additional training. So, that was good. I did not see any sustainment. As far as areas for improvement of how the team worked, there was a good brainstorming going on, and again, there wasn't a lot of time for that. But I think that if we would have had more time, there would have been a lot more. And it was interesting because, and I think this is mostly because of the time, but the team seemed to resign itself like, oh no, the concrete isn't here, it's gonna be late. So the team really seemed to resign itself to, uh-oh, there's nothing we can do.
Okay. So, I think you guys are doing a good job. I think an important part of the tabletop is the after action reviews of identifying what went well, what didn't go well. Was there a lot of blaming going on? Was there a lot of finger pointing? Was there a lot of solutions that are identified? If you come out of a tabletop program and not have identifiable action items, then you didn't do the tabletop program effectively, okay? So going into this mindset that anytime we have a project or emergency, it's not going to go always to the script, okay? And being able to pivot and act is an important key of doing these tabletop programs, is identifying these solutions. When we have no answers to those solutions, put down what we think we could do to address those ones, and then in real life, go and find out if this scenario would really happen to my organization, how would we react? Do we have the protocols in place? Do we have the relationships with the service providers or the local community to help address if that scenario became a reality? Okay. So with that, I kind of want to open it up any questions, if there's any people online, any questions from the group. Again, effective tabletop program is not going to be in 20 minutes, okay? I just want to give you a taste of what a tabletop program is. And really, if you're looking at doing one effectively, I go and do these with our members. I tell them I need a minimum of 4 hours with you, if not more. If I could do a day-long one, you can really get some effective stuff on. With a good 4-hour one, you're going to be able to get a bunch, identify action items that need to be addressed.
In real life, you'd be looking at realistic scenarios,
correct,
not arbitrary scenarios.
Correct.
The real purpose of this exercise was to learn the tabletop exercise.
Correct. And, a lot of times I find out, I'll have a talk with a company that wants me to come out and do one, and, tell me what keeps you up at night. What are your fears for your organization? Not just where it causes casualties of your employees or the community. What are fears that keep you up at night about your organization? And that's kind of what I can address and bring those scenarios up during a tabletop. So you can do those to yourself. What's going to keep me up at night at this project I'm working on or this company I'm working at? These are the things that could really happen. And try to do a tabletop and bring those experts to the table and work it out.
Just one other observation. I would submit that after you do the exercise and you incorporate the lessons learned into a plan, you got to exercise the plan.
Absolutely.
And some companies I've been with in the past don't want to shut down the line for an hour to exercise a plan.
Correct.
Others who have exercised the plan, when things happen, it's almost muscle memory. I mean,
Correct.
you go right into doing the
And it's important to revisit an exercise too. Even though you've done an exercise today, it's good to follow up with it, whether in 6 months or a year, of what we learned from this, the corrective actions we put in place from that exercise. Are they still effective for the same scenario? Or has the business operations changed? Has the community changed? Where that plan is now null and void and we have to come up with a different solutions. Maybe there's new city officials that have no understanding of your organization. We need to go through that scenario again. So once you've done a tabletop exercise program, you address the items, that doesn't mean it's done. You need to continue to focus on that item and do it again, okay? Any other questions?
Big round of applause.
Thank you.
Really worthwhile exercise. Really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, sir.
And, it's a great exercise.
Appreciate it.
We have a small
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, I hope everybody signed in. Yes.
We hope you enjoyed this recorded presentation given at one of the Atlanta Metro Chapter meetings of the Georgia Society of Professional Engineers, an affiliate of the National Society of Professional Engineers. To find out more about us or to join us, check us out at gspe.org.